President Biden's pick for Education Secretary testified for nearly 3 hours during a confirmation hearing Wednesday. The Senate Committee on Health and Education questioned Miguel Cardona on everything from student loan forgiveness to transgender student rights. Cardona, who began his career as an elementary school teacher, most recently served as Connecticut's first Latino commissioner of education. During Wednesday's hearing, he reasserted his stance on reopening schools for in-person classes.
Soy Miguel Cardona. We're here today in the midst of one of the most challenging school years in American history. For far too many of our students, this year has piled on crisis after crisis. As a parent and as an educator, I've lived those challenges alongside millions of families. Our nation's educational challenges didn't begin with the pandemic, but it has exacerbated inequities in our educational system. These inequities will endure, and they'll prevent the potential of this country unless tackled head-on.
New York Times contributor Kevin Carey joins me now. He's also the Vice President of Education Policy and Knowledge Management at New America, a think tank seeking to advance equity and access in education. Kevin, welcome. Thanks for joining us. So Miguel Cardona was not a household name before he was picked to run the Department of Education. What can you tell us about his relevant experience and what his goals for the department are?
Well, President Biden said he was going to select a school teacher to lead the nation's education system. That's exactly what he did. Dr. Cardona began his career as a fourth grade teacher in the public school system where he grew up in Meriden, Connecticut. He quickly became a principal and then became the youngest education commissioner in the state of Connecticut several years ago.
Well, the next Secretary of Education will spearhead the Biden administration's goal of reopening schools within the first 100 days. What about Miguel Cardona's experience with the pandemic attracted the new administration's attention?
Well, this issue has been front and center for him as the Commissioner of Education in Connecticut. Connecticut has been pretty successful as a state in getting public schools open while not making sure that public schools are safe and are not centers for spread of the coronavirus. And of course, he's seen it from all perspectives. He's been a teacher, he's been a principal, he's been a student. So I think he gets all of the different concerns at play here.
So it's interesting. Today, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky said, quote, vaccination of teachers is not a prerequisite for safe reopening of schools. Where does Miguel Cardona stand on that? And is there a consensus among educators on this issue?
In his testimony today, Dr. Cardona indicated, I think, pretty clearly that he did not think we should wait until every teacher and every student has been vaccinated. That there is a real crisis in American public education, and it's the students who often need education the most that are losing the most by being out of in-person school. And so there are ways through testing, through mitigation, through a variety of safety measures that we can reopen schools, provided that we do our part in the rest of society to make sure that we also bring the levels of the pandemic down before we reach total vaccination.
Well, we heard Miguel Cardona introduce himself in Spanish at the start of his opening remarks. And you recently wrote about the potential benefit of having an education secretary who learned English as a child in an American public school. I mean, I read this with great interest because that was 40 years ago. But things have changed. Classrooms have changed. And also, you know, as a parent, this is something I'm really interested in. Our understanding of sort of early childhood development has changed as well, and the way that children process language. But why do you believe that Miguel Cardona's experience 40 years ago, learning English in an American classroom, is so relevant to what's happening in American schools today?
Well, as you say, things have changed. There are many more English learners in our public schools than there used to be. Dr. Cardona was born in the 1970s, which was really a low point for immigration in this country. But he did grow up in a Spanish-speaking household. His parents immigrated from Puerto Rico. Today, 1 in 10 American school children begin as English learners. Up to 30% of young school children have at least one parent at home whose native language is not English. So this is no longer unusual, and it's not just in states that are near the borders of Mexico, nor are all of these students Spanish-speaking. A quarter of English learners, millions of students, are not Spanish-speaking. They speak a variety of other languages. What we've learned over the last 40 years, since Dr. Cardona himself was a student, is that there are great benefits of bilingualism. Particularly young children have the ability to absorb and learn language at a pretty rapid rate. Anyone who's a parent who's seen their kids, I'm a parent, gain fluency, it's really pretty miraculous. And in fact, these days, a lot of the wealthiest parents, English-speaking parents, want their children to become bilingual. They put them in immersion schools so they can learn Spanish or French or Mandarin or a variety of languages. And so, being bilingual can be an asset as long as our schools are well prepared to teach students who are English learners. And in many ways, Dr. Cardona's success and his ascension to this job is just evidence of that.
I want to ask you about another topic. Senator Elizabeth Warren pressed Cardona to commit to providing immediate relief to borrowers with student loan debt, while criticizing former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos's handling of that situation. What is the Biden administration's stance on the massive student debt facing so many in the nation?
The Biden administration has said pretty clearly for a while, going back to the campaign, that they were in favor of two things. One, they want to make college cheaper going forward, free for anyone going to community college and free for public four-year universities for families making less than $125,000 a year, so middle-class families. And President Biden has supported forgiving up to $10,000 of existing student loan debt for people who went to college before we were able to put in place these reforms.
All right, a conversation we'll have for another time. Kevin, Carey, Kevin, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.